Hey, listeners, quick update before we get on with today's episode. I just want to let you know that we finally have a website. You can go to sounddiscussionpodcast.com where you can see all of our episodes, our links to our socials. We have a YouTube page with all of our episodes, and every single podcast platform that we are on, you can subscribe to there. So please go check it out and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you can, please give us a 5-star rating and leave a review. That really helps us out. We're trying to do a big push this year to get up to 5,000 listeners per month. And that would be super helpful if you could go and subscribe and leave a 5-star rating. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy today's episode.
I think people are going to love the episode. So, yeah, I think this is the end of January episode. Nate, is that the plan?
Yeah, I think this is season 2, episode 1.
Yeah.
13 episodes.
I know. How did we get here? This is ridiculous.
It is kind of interesting. It's not a matter of like, I never thought we'd get here, but so many projects that you hear about don't make it past that sort of initial hump. And I think, 1 year is a good marker for, well, we made it past that first big push, right? Yeah. That's always the hardest one. And I think we have a lot of really good ideas for what to do here in season 2. It'll yet to be seen, whether our guests that we've asked will actually be able to show up. But yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think that we've gotten a lot of good feedback from our listeners. You included, Bob. Thank you.
I've thoroughly enjoyed it. The only thing I've told myself now is not to listen to it last thing of the day because my head's spinning afterwards thinking of ideas. So I now listen to it first thing in the morning.
Who would have thought we could be educational?
Hi, and welcome to Sound Discussion. Each episode, we discuss a music topic which we have all had first-hand experience with. This will be anything from getting started, recording, playing live, mixing, mastering, and everything in between. Most episodes, we will have a special guest to bring their professional experience to the discussion. So, let's get started.
Today's guest is an ex-RAF pilot, instrumentalist, Midi master, and all-round great guy. His EDM music has such incredible complexity and depth that it's made one of our previous guests, Joe Gilder, utter the now infamous statement, Bob, 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 Bob. My family call him Gin Bob for reasons that we will get onto. And that probably will segue nicely into how I know Bob. But please welcome to the podcast, Bob Ellis. Hi, Bob.
Hey, Bob.
Ben.
Hey,
Hi,
Bob.
Neil. Hi, Nate.
Hey.
I mean, thank you so much for inviting me because, when I look down your guest list that you've had so far, with Joe, Ian, Warren and Mike Sr. and I don't know Lee, Leanne, Sarah and John and Joanne, but every one I've listened to has resonated with something that either I've been advised to do or told to do or I've experienced myself. And it's just been such a joy to listen to all these podcasts. So the fact you've invited me to be here is a real honor. So thank you.
Oh, it's great to have you. It's great to have you.
Absolutely.
I think all of us have listened to your music over the past. I mean, I've probably listened to it more than anyone, but I think one of the things that stood out to all of us when we sort of first heard it all that time ago was the incredible depth and complexity and layering that you have that, the rest of us sort of dabble with MIDI with a string part in a ballad somewhere. And, it's not on the same level. So we're delighted to have you on the podcast. I think we will get into a bit of that in the next hour. Oh, Nate, I forgot you weren't here for that bit. I've said we're going to try and keep it to an hour.
We'll try and keep it to an hour. Yeah, that's usually what we shoot for.
Yeah, and, that goes really well.
We haven't really succeeded yet.
No. In fact, I don't think we've ever made it, have we? So we'll try and do an hour. So, Bob, tell us about your background. How you got... I mentioned that you were an RAF pilot. How did you get from there to here? Yeah, tell us a bit about how you got here.
Well, I mean, I suppose, my love of music started in the 1960s, which is now showing my age a little bit. That, like most UK school kids, we learnt to play the recorder. I then learnt to play the trumpet, and I was in the school orchestra. And then I joined a choir. I was the chorister, head chorister. And until my voice broke. And then without auto-tune, nobody wants to hear me singing anymore. One of the biggest regrets I ever had in my life was that I started doing piano lessons, and I gave up at the age of 12. And who knows where my music would be now had I continued. But as we know in life that, we go down these little roads and avenues, some are dead ends, some takes us to amazing destinations. And my music now was determined by me at the age of 12 deciding to give up piano lessons. And then I had a huge distraction of joining the Royal Air Force to learn to be a pilot. But during that time, in 1977, I heard at a disco there was Magic Fly by Space and Jean-Michel Jarre's Oxygen Part 4. And I thought, what the heck is that sound? It sounds amazing. And of course, they were all synthesizers. And I just knew that was something I wanted to do. And 3 years later, when my training finished, I bought my first synth, which was a Yamaha CS30L, which was monophonic. I had no Midi at that stage. And so I bought a TIAC 144 Porter Studio cassette recorder. And then it needed something polyphonic, so I bought a Casio CT400. And I don't let the world hear the music that I produced during that period. But then another distraction came along. I got involved in competition aerobatic flying, which was very expensive and got too expensive. And so I thought, I've got to stop this. And I saved up enough money to get back into music again and started to build up some more gear. And then in 1984, I got my first music computer, which was a Yamaha CX5M, but it needed notation, and I got bored with that very quickly. And thankfully, Atari brought out the ST, and Steinberg in '86, I bought their Pro 24, which was a MIDI recording software, which sort of revolutionized music at that period. And for the next few years, I sort of dabbled. I made an LP or an album, but I made it onto a CDR, but it never got released or anything like that because there were just too many distractions. And the major one really came in 1991 when the family was growing, work was getting busier, and then, much to my wife's consternation, I discovered golf. And that was the end of music. And also, I decided to then build and fly an airplane. And so after 25 years of these major distractions, I knew it was time to sell this airplane, and I knew I wanted to get back into music. And I thought, if I'm going to get back, I want to do it properly. So I started with the basics, and I did Graham Cochrane's Rethink Mixing course. That then introduced me to dueling mixes, where I look back actually because I wanted to see how many. I did 45 of those dueling mixes, and I think it's the reps. Yeah. It's the reps that are going to get you there. And of course, that brought me into contact with Joe, and I was then following Joe's podcasts. And I remember in one he said, "Look, you need to collaborate with people." And I've just collaborated with a UK drummer, and he mentioned your name, Ben, and I contacted you to do some. Unusually to do some drumming work because normally I don't. I normally just use drum machines. But we then discovered we'd both done Ian Shepherd's mastering masterclass, and we decided then to sort of master each other's music. And I definitely got the good end of the deal of that because I produced so much more work. Not because I'm any better, because that's not the case. It's just that I'm retired, so I've got the time to be able to do it. And you're so busy with your business. So and so I sort of started building up the ability to put out hopefully some reasonable work. And I made myself a project name of Season 3, and I produced 4 albums and 2 EPs over the next few years. And then I joined Home Studio Corner, which is where I met you guys. And it was fantastic to be able to do all the challenges, which stretched me, and it was great fun. But the one thing that was restricting me a little bit was that I wasn't getting the constructive feedback that I really, really needed to step up that little bit extra. And I was looking around, and I saw that there was a master's degree starting in 2022, songwriting and music production, where they were guaranteeing critical feedback from people in the industry. And so I did that full-time for 12 months. then I also decided, because there's a business element to that course, that if you do a search for season 3 in Google, you will not get any of my music. All you'll get is hundreds and hundreds of episodes of season 3. So a rethink, and I found Silent Gratitude was a name nobody had used. There was no YouTube channel with it. I looked at the meaning. One of them wasn't particularly good, but the other one definitely applied, which is basically grateful for everything you've got in life and not being shouty about it. And I thought, yeah, that applies. And so with the music that I produced during the course, and since I've produced another 4 albums and 2 EPs as Silent Gratitude, and that's where we are today.
Amazing. What an incredible journey.
It has been, yeah. I mean, I've been extremely lucky. You know, life's been very good to me, and hopefully it will continue to be good.
Yeah. I'd like to go really quickly back to something that you said as you were describing your time in music, and you took time off and you stepped away from music for a number of years. Because I think that that's something that a lot of people, myself particularly, has struggled with, raising kids, other responsibilities, and not everyone has time for, spending 8 hours a day in a studio 5 days a week. For me, it's 1 day a week if I'm lucky, sometimes a few hours at a time. How did you balance that, the drive to do other things, flying, golf, whatever other passions might have been around you at the time, but also keep music within an arm's reach? And maybe you felt consternation about that, and that tension of like, I didn't get to play music this week or this month, or maybe you didn't. What was that like for you?
I don't know whether it's because of it's my makeup probably, and also the professions I've been in, that you can compartmentalize very, very easily, and I've been able to do that. And during that period of 25 years, whilst it was not, it wasn't a total break in so much as that, I might, get the odd little, I might have had one synth dabble, but did nothing, actually produced nothing with it. It would have been just dabbling. And obviously, during that time, I was still accumulating music by listening to, all my favorite bands and discovering new music. And that was informing me all that during that 25 years, all that new music I was listening to was informing really the sort of the direction, I've headed in now. So it certainly wasn't wasted. And I think by having these breaks, it does re-energize you. There's no two ways about it. And I don't, although I'm retired, I could do music 8 hours a day. I don't think that would be healthy. And so I actually don't do it for all day at all. I tend to be more productive in the mornings. So I will compartmentalize, the music in the morning, do stuff in the afternoon, do something different, and then come back to it. And I think that keeps it fresh. But I know it's very hard when you're working to try and do it. And I've been guilty of taking some of your time in the past as well away from producing your own music. But
no, not at all. I mean, the thing is, like, yeah, I have music that I want to make and record. And for multiple reasons, I don't think that that's the time, the season in my life that's going to happen right now. And I'm becoming more and more okay with that. I wasn't okay with that like 6 or 12 months ago. And now I'm becoming a bit more okay with it. But I do find that working with other people to produce their music, like recording violin tracks for your last song, Bob, that is a bit easier of a reach for me because I can, my microphone's always set up. So it's just a matter of turning it on, standing beneath it, and playing something and seeing what comes out, right? That is, it seems easier to me than sitting down with a guitar and saying, okay, let's write something. Because then I'll just sit there for 2 hours and, fiddle around with stuff and probably not get anywhere. And then I'll just get more frustrated that I didn't record anything that day. So I do find that working with other people and producing music with them seems to be easier than sitting down and with the objective of writing a song.
I mean, if you're gonna write even just a song by yourself,
right,
that takes a lot of time. And then like the writing process, and then excuse me, if you're gonna record it yourself, then you're recording it, you're arranging it, you're mixing it, you're mastering it.
Sometimes being the all-in-one is not as fun as it sounds. I mean, it's freeing to have all of this equipment in your studio, right? You can do everything from tip to tail, and that is one of the beauties of recording in today's day and age. But at the same time, having to be that single hat wearing decision maker, performer, etc., it can be overwhelming and lead you to maybe not consider other choices that a third party, sitting in the room with you or collaborating with would make. You miss out on things sometimes because you're on your one track, and I mean that's how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, talking about collaboration, Joe sowed the seed way back. Well, that would have been probably in that must have been 2017, I think it was, and it's something I've been forced to do because I can't sing. But
you can sing, Bob.
No, I can't. What I want to use though is people. What is it? I can't remember who it was, and somebody said somebody sounded really, really good, and he said the reason I'm good is because I surround myself with people who are even better, and that's very much the people who I collaborate with because they make my music sound so much better, and I think that is the main benefit I find of collaborating.
Yeah, definitely. I think. I think everybody, when you look back at anything great that's created through history musically, it's very rare that it's one person. It's one person surrounded by equally or even better people around them. You could take it to an extreme and say, Michael Jackson's album without Quincy Jones, I'm going to argue wouldn't have been the same. They probably wouldn't have been as good because that ability to, as Nate said, bounce ideas off somebody else and respect the opinion that's coming back is... Yeah, it will always take it to a different place.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing that's been interesting with the people I've collaborated with, I've only asked people that I want to collaborate with because I've heard them, sing or produce some work, and I don't want to interfere with their artistic capability. So I will give them a brief, and it may be to follow a melody, or it may be say follow the melody in this part, but after that, it's all over to you. Do your bit. And I can say, hand on heart, that of the audio files that collaborators have sent to me, I have never asked them to redo anything. Now, there may be some slight faults or some, that things could be done better, but I don't care. For me personally, other people might hear it. I don't hear it. I just hear a really good piece of work that they've done. It may get processed a lot because that's the style of music I do, but I haven't changed anything. And I that's the reason I collaborate with people, because they're so good at doing what they do.
It's kind of like rolling the dice, right? You sort of just see what happens. And frequently, even, when I've collaborated with people, there's been pointers here and there, maybe to tighten something up. But I always seem to like the idea and what it does for the music. Yeah, I can honestly say I don't think I've ever gotten something from somebody that I've worked with and I said, sorry, man, this is not working. Try again.
No, there's always a layer of
respect. Because it always just works. Because it's something I wouldn't have thought of, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it may not be my favorite thing, but it's different.
Yeah.
And it works.
Yeah, and there's the age-old thing of a drummer will play what a drummer hears, but a guitarist will... If you ask a guitarist to program a drum track, they won't program what a drummer would play because they're not a drummer. And it's like, a drummer wouldn't play a bass part like a bass player would. So if you're wanting drums done, ask a drummer to do them. If you're wanting, if you're wanting great vocals, ask a singer to do it. Don't ask a drummer to do it. That's the age.
Unless you're Dave Grohl, then you're just good at everything. So.
Dave Grohl doesn't count because it's just not acceptable to discuss in any further detail because he can play everything.
Steve Wilson's the same from Porcupine Tree, isn't he?
Yeah. Just don't. There are some people who are, just go above and beyond, don't they? Phil Collins, But,
just been starting to watch his 2-hour thing. It's sad to see the way he is. In fact, for my music degree, my essay was on In the Air Tonight, and it was interesting looking at his history and what he's gone through. And amazing.
I've said it on this podcast before. He's one of my favourite drummers of all time. And people can tell me there's better drummers, but Not for me.
Well, he's got one of the most iconic drum parts in all of music history. I mean,
and anything you listen to, we don't need to go down the Phil Collins Appreciation Society route, but anything Sussudio is just unbelievable to play as a drummer. So anyway, we'll get back to Bob, because that was the whole point of this episode.
Yeah, I didn't mean to sidetrack that, but I just wanted to. I wanted to ask him that as part of his story coming up. So thank you, Bob, for indulging my sidetracking question there. But yeah,
I think your sidetracking question did work quite well though, because one of the questions I had was, whenever I'm lucky enough that I master, as Bob said, all the stuff for that, and then about a week later, a bottle of gin will arrive through the post, and my wife will go, "Did you just master something for Bob?" It's like, yeah, I absolutely did. So brilliant, and they're always appreciated and never necessary, but love them anyway. But I get to hear it when it comes through to me for mastering, and they are they're so complex. I mean, I write stupid little pop songs, right? They are so complex. I would love to know where do you start? What is the starting point for a Bob Ellis song? Because
you see, I don't think they're complex, because I'm a fairly simple person. Maybe they do sound complex, but they're not complex. But where does it start? Well, I mean, to give you an idea, the album I'm going to produce in 2025, which I'll probably start around May time, I'm already thinking about it, because what I do, because I do concept EPs and albums, I tend to start planning ahead even while I'm still in the middle of a project, because it gives me something to look forward to and research. So what I'll do is something will have occurred to me that I want to write about, and I'll then speak to Jill, my wife, about it, because she often will be writing lyrics with me or even singing on the tracks. And then in the last couple of years, I've been going to, because I'm not in a band, I've been going to Google Bard, or it's now Google Gemini, and I'll literally speak to it as if it's a human and then say, look, I'm planning this EP album. Can you throw some ideas at me? And then we'll just bounce ideas off each other. I'll take the good bits that I like. And then from that, I'll work out, on how many instrumentals, how many songs there's going to be, because it invariably will either be a journey or a series of songs that are all linked to each other with messages I want. And then once I've decided what genres they're going to be in and which are going to be songs, I'll then give Jill the for her to write, and then I'll write some myself. And then I'll actually go onto YouTube, and if I know it's going to be in a specific genre, I'll just get a big set of mixes in that genre and just listen and listen and listen. And I'll pick out a few tracks that really inspire me, and I'll pull those in, and they're my reference tracks for each song. And at the time, as this approaches, I'll also be revising the particular genre, because I don't write in the same genre all the time. And I use a guy called Will Darling at EDM Tips, and he does these fantastic how-to, and he starts from scratch. And a lot of it's revision for me, because I may well have done the odd one or two before, but I'll do my research for that. And then I'll also produce a template so that I've got all the sort of sounds from that genre, because there are certain things that are very specific in EDM, where certain things have to occur in a particular genre, otherwise it will just get thrown out by listeners. And once I get to that stage, I'm almost ready to go. And so what I'll do for each song is I'll import the reference track into my DAW. I'll set the tempo to match it, and I'll find out what key it's in. And it sounds like at this stage, you're probably thinking, actually, he's going to copy. But no, that's not the case. I'm using it as inspiration, because what I will do is I will try and copy the kick, the snare, clap, because that's genre specific. And I'll do some deep analysis of what is it about that track that inspired me. Is it a bouncing arpeggiation? Is it a particular set of sounds? And I'll also then note the chord progression that they used in that song. And I then make a note that I will not use that same chord progression. So I will then choose a chord progression of my own. The lyrics generally, which are will always come first, the way I tend to do it. And then I will write a melody for the lyrics. And if there's no lyrics, I'll just write the melody just as it comes into my head. And I will, during the production of that song, I will flick occasionally between the reference track just to see it's sounding similar in the same genre. But if I was to play the reference tracks at the end, some you may see some similarities, but most of the time, they're nothing like. But that helps me get going. So I never have writer's block. But if it's an ambient track, that's totally different. That's just purely improvisation. I don't use a reference track.
Wow, it's something that I think because EDM is quite there. I don't want to call them rules, but there are defined guidelines for different types of EDM, aren't there? That sort of you have to follow, or the EDM community will just say, well, that's not what you've done. That's not right. Which I think is probably different to most other sort of genre. That
I feel like even different genres have their own set of rules. Maybe not like that hard of rules, but like, I mean, was it Beyonce that kind of came out with like a country type album, and everybody lost their shit? Like, she shouldn't be doing that. And I've listened to some of it, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds pretty freaking cool.
But I don't think I don't think we should get tied down to genres sometimes. No, although I do, I sort of have to with this. But I think it was Pharrell Williams said that if you really want to come up with something original, what you need to do is you need to fuse two ideas together. And he referred to the Reese's cupcake as the obvious example. And I think that's where a lot of artists really start to produce original stuff. And that's something, because I still class myself in the learning phase, that I'm getting to a point now where I know my tracks are professional sounding. And I think that's where the reference tracks I will put them to one side, and then I will start to fuse certain things. And I particularly want to fuse orchestral work or cinematic work into, in fact, it could be argued that some of that is already in there, because in some genres like chill step, future garage, which I've been doing recently, does use a lot of influence from the synth.
I mean, even back to like I know we talked about it before, but Ed Sheeran got sued because one of his tracks sounded similar to I can't remember the other song, but whatever it
was the Marvin Gaye one, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yep. And he went to court, and he brought a guitar, and he played like several songs that had the same chord progression, and he's like, look, you can't copyright a chord progression. You can't. So what you're doing is you're just using the bones of a song for inspiration. Well, that's what everybody has done, throughout history.
I mean, it's a very similar songwriting sort of tactic, in that you can take somebody's song, maybe just eliminate the vocals and the melody, and just start with the guitar part. Write your own song on top of an already existing song, right, with different lyrics, a different melody. I've tried that. I've never released anything from that method, but it's certainly an interesting way to write a song based off of one that you love, right?
Yeah, and I agree, Neil. I think it's, you can't copyright chord progressions, and that's that. But the sad thing is now, because of that case, as far as I read, is that now Ed Sheeran is going to record every single songwriting session he ever does to prove that he actually came with, which is very sad. I mean, it's clearly the melody, isn't it? It's the melody and the rhythm of that melody and the lyrics that are defining whether it's truly original. But I mean, you could argue, like Oasis, hugely influenced by the Beatles, and so people have been doing it for years and will continue to do it. But I think when you learn it, particularly when you're doing it at home and you're learning to want to become a songwriter or I think if you've got starting blocks and that's why I find this reference track method so easy, because I didn't used to use it before, but when I discovered it, I found my productivity of producing music just shot up crazy, and because it's now giving me the confidence level that I don't need it, certainly for the ambient tracks. I won't need them for. But even a lot of the top EDM artists are openly saying that they use reference tracks for inspiration. So, and I think it will work with any genre. I know the majority of people from Home Studio Corner are singer-songwriters or rock bands, and I think that method, if you're stuck, it's a great way to get yourself started.
Yeah.
Is there some sort of is there some sort of thought in certain genres of music that using a reference track is not good, it's forbidden in some way? Like, because you said that that people are surprised to hear that an artist might use a reference track. Why is that surprising?
I think sometimes they tend to use them at the mixing stage, and occasionally an artist might throw a mastering engineer a reference track, although I think it's a bit late by then because, you are a bit limited as to what you can do in that area of mastering. But no, I mean actually using it at the very beginning of the whole process, which is, I would suggest, is probably not normal in the sort of genres that you guys will be writing in. But it is very popular in EDM.
Okay, yeah, but I wouldn't even be surprised at that. I wouldn't even. I certainly wouldn't be like, oh, really? Why would they do that? No, it seems. I guess it seems normal to me.
There are people that are like, well, if you're going to write a song, you got to write a song, from pure inspiration, from nothing. And it's like, no, you're just going to sit there twiddling your thumbs trying to figure it out. You got to have some
that hardly ever happens in real life.
You're right. But there are people out there that would say that. And that's probably why there's that taboo of maybe, oh, you're starting with someone else's song and you're trying to copy and whatnot.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No.
I think it's a good exercise to copy, and I remember Joe doing that as in the home studio corner. I think it's an excellent thing to actually copy, and also by mixing lots of other tracks, you're also all the time you're soaking up the production skills of the people who've made those tracks and the way they've arranged it. Because I've come to a conclusion that the only real difference between a professional sounding track and an amateur track is that the professionals just arrange things so much better, and they've got the clarity, and the clarity is there partly because of the arrangement, because they know how to EQ. The rest of it, I mean, I think that's generally what separates them. Because there's some amateur tracks that, if with some just slight adjustments, should be top 10 hits sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been, without a doubt, we hear a lot, why don't my tracks sound professional? And usually it's either because it's a bad song to start with and I don't care who you are, you're not making it sound any good, right? I mean, that is the brutally honest truth of...
Harsh truth, yeah.
The brutally honest truth is, if it's a bad song, you can give it to Andrew Sheps, it's still sounding like a bad song. If it's a good song, then it's most likely you just don't have the experience, not the ability, but the experience to make that sound how it should sound.
100%.
One of the things I've learned to do, and I think one of the things we always talk about on this podcast everybody talks, is constructive listening. So being able to actually sit down and break down what's happening in that track. The bit I've learned quite recently is when I listen to pop songs, proper pop songs, like your Katy Perry's, your Taylor Swift's, your whatever they are, the amount of things that are happening in that song is huge. Because it might be there's one bell at the beginning of one chorus and then you never hear that bell again. But it's all those little bits. And genuinely for me, they are the bits that's what the pros do. They don't go beginning of the chorus bell every time. Oh no, it's just the third chorus. It gets a bell on the intro and you're like, whoa, wait. Where'd the bell come from? And then and now the bell's gone.
That kind of pop music construction is really interesting to me. I was watching a YouTube video, a mix breakdown that Jack Antonoff was doing of a Sabrina Carpenter song. And, I've listened to her latest record, and it's a really, really, really good record. And to see that Jack breaking down sounds that you can't hear in the song until he points it out. And then you're like, oh yeah, that I think it was like a crowd noise or something, like cheering. Like you didn't hear that. It just sounded like something elevating the track, but then he pointed it out and you're like, yeah, I would not have picked that out. And there's a lot of that happening, not only in that song, but in pop music in general.
That's an interesting thing you mentioned there, that Ben and Nate, you're talking about, because one of the big things on my master's degree was that they wanted you to do critical listening, not so you can necessarily learn from other people, but critical listening of your own music at a level that you probably would never have thought before. And the best way to do that is obviously to critically analyze what other people are doing. And the way I did that for quite a while would I'd get a blank sheet of paper, split it in half. That's the stereo field. And I'd also have, the top half of the paper would be the high frequencies, mid frequencies, lows. And listen to one of your favorite tracks and actually write down all the different sounds you could hear in the stereo field, both vertical and horizontal. And it forces you to really, really listen where they are, and you can learn so much. So I really support that idea, Ben, of critical listening.
Yeah,
that's a really good exercise to write that down in that gridded format.
I do it a lot for when I was sort of trying to educate myself on mastering. I didn't do the stereo field so much because by the time it gets to me, the mix engineer has put the stereo field where they want the stereo field. Yes, we can do a bit with widening and narrowing in places, but I did it with high, mid, low, mid, lows, and just listened to my favorite songs and tried to make a note of where does it sit, where is the energy, what have they done with, and it is genre specific, obviously, because if you listen to a Dr. Dre song, I mean, it's just massive bass sound, loads of highs, and they've sort of scooped out the middle. And I know that they haven't done that, but that's kind of an exaggerated view of it. Whereas if you listen to, I don't know, I think I posted into the group this song by Rumour, and I said it was one of the best songs I've heard, and it's just so empty, and that it's loads of mids. It's got loads of mids in that song. But so yeah, I think constructive listening is important for anyone in music, whether they're a songwriter or, if you want to write a song like Marvin Gaye, go and listen to Marvin Gaye and write down how he wrote his song. Don't copy his song, but understand how he put that song together. Because I think, there's nothing like it.
It's time really well spent, for sure.
Yeah.
And then if you do that for a while, obviously that's doing it because you're forcing yourself to do it. After a while, it becomes natural. And I agree, Ben, with the mastering. I mean, the one thing that getting involved in mastering helped me was that, I listened. It forced me to have to listen to so many different genres and make me appreciate a lot more about some of the amazing production work that goes into metal, which I'd never really appreciated before. And it forces you to really critically listen to the whole of the frequency spectrum. And hopefully, because, in mastering, of course, we are the sort of the last quality control, and we're there to try and find those little edits and pops and clicks that you wouldn't have heard from the woods and the trees. So I think critical listening is crucial, no matter. And I think I know it's a slight tangent, but I would advise everybody to get involved in mastering, even if you don't end up mastering music, because one of the things I do when I come to one of the things that we often talk about is how do you know when a song is finished? For me, it's when my mixing notes, which I tend to mix as I go along now, but when my notes get fairly almost down to about 3 or 4, and I tick them off, I ask myself a simple question: is this ready for mastering? Now, if you haven't mastered anything, how can you answer that question? So by having done it, and I do keep up with it, I don't do it as much as I used to do. I'm now able to answer that question, and that's the point when I hand it off to Ben for that quality control. So I never master my own music, and that's something I would recommend to everybody. Yes, master your own music to get the T-shirt, but after that, use somebody for quality control, and it's paid dividends.
Well, it goes right back into the whole collaboration point that we were talking about at the beginning of the episode. And work again, people working in their basements with all of the technology they have at their disposal, just because you can and you should get good at working with your equipment and your plugins and your tools and know how to work all of them. But at some point, you're probably going to benefit more from collaborating with somebody else, whether it's songwriting or producing or mixing. Just because you can do every single step along the way doesn't mean that you should. You can, but your work may not realize an unseen potential until you do bring in somebody else to do something for you, as opposed to you trying to do it yourself. So, Bob, you're perfectly capable of mastering your own music. And in fact, you might feel that you get the most out of that in some ways, because you know exactly what you did to make it, to get the song to that point for mixing. So you know exactly what you need to do for mastering. But also, having someone else do it will introduce a result that you probably couldn't have thought of or couldn't have gotten.
Well, I'll give you a recent example of that. Is that the album that I'm releasing soon has got 4 ambient tracks, and I recorded those ambient tracks, mixed them, said to myself, yes, they're ready for mastering.
There it is.
And when Ben sent me back the ambient tracks, I thought, flipping heck, this is a wee bit different to what I mixed, and the reason being is he almost like he took me into the mix and immersed me in the track, which I hadn't done with it, and it sounded so much better. Now I wouldn't have done that, so that track is better because it was mastered by somebody else, and
that's a great example.
Yeah,
£5 is in the post. Yeah. Bob, don't worry. The cash is in the post.
Another bottle of gin, you mean, Ben?
Yeah. I'd say music, no matter how you do music is so much better when you do it with other people.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I mean, even in live music, like doing live music by yourself is okay. But, I copy people's music every weekend by playing it, right?
Yeah. And learning from it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, it's just so much more fun when you've got somebody else doing the drums, and you've got a full band behind you, and they bring their musical talents and their interpretation of these songs that we're covering. And I know I'm in a cover band, but even if I was in a band that did originals, like, everybody would bring their own, style and feedback and their own musicality to it. That's the thing. Like, Ben injects his musicality into the master, which you experience, and as opposed to you doing everything by yourself.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm conscious of we're trying to stay within our hour, so we're going to keep. No, there's no way this is going to work, is it? But let's go with it anyway. So, one of the things that I'm always amazed at whenever I get anything from you, Bob, is everything that is almost everything on your record is a VST instrument. How? Because it just blows my mind. But do you have thousands of VST instruments that you sit there and go, I need this sound, and then you go through 46,000 sounds until you go, or do you have a sort of collection that how do VST instruments work for you?
I do have a large collection because, like most people, I suffer from plug-in acquisition syndrome, and I have been treated for this on many occasions. And I do try to go into rehab, but I'm getting a lot better because I really, it's very easy to build up a crazy collection. And so it was about a year or so ago, I thought, right, I need a list of things that I actually need, not what I actually want. And there are very few things that I actually need. The only the thing I'll buy is if somebody mentions or crops up that is quite unique, that can augment my palette that I've already got. So, but I think if I skip back to when I said how I prepare for an album, one of the things I make is a template. And when I make the template for that album, I'll have a rough idea of the sounds that I'm going to need for that genre. And I will actually use some fairly narrow presets. And I mean, presets is the thing. That's the main thing that I would say is your main answer. And the professionals use them as well. But I think you need and it is a basic, you don't need much, a basic understanding of sound design, so that the sound that is in your head, that it's very close to that particular preset there, but it needs adjusting. So you make the adjustments using your simple knowledge of sound design, whether it's to make it a quicker attack or release, or whether it needs filtering or modulation or whatever. And what I'll often do then is at the end of that project, when that preset that maybe from somebody else has been modified, I'll save that as a preset. And that's what it's mainly down to. And what I will do, though, is I will look through my collections and and think, I haven't used that for a while, and I've used that one too much, so I'll actually put the one out of it. But there are a couple that I like to make an appearance every now and again, because that's the sort of thing that people might recognize as a bit of my sound, I suppose. So yeah.
And are they typically, so I guess they're all sort of synthesizer sort of plugins, are they? Or are they string libraries?
There's a mix. Yeah, there's a real mixture. Because I do a bit of orchestration, I like to incorporate some more elements of orchestration, particularly strings. I just particularly love strings more than any other section. So I've built up libraries over. Indeed, I've built up some libraries over the time that are you can only get through. Well, you can get them through modeling, and I've heard some of the modeling is very good, but I just use sampled sections of the orchestra. The synthesizers are a mixture of. Do you know what the crazy thing is? The synthesizer I use most of all is actually free, and it's called Vital. And although I have paid the developer to get more presets and things, because I don't think it should be free. But I do use a small selection of synthesizers that I know quite well. And it's a bit like, maybe, I don't know, if some guitarists, I know that they've got racks of guitars on the back, just like I've got loads of VSTs. But I'm sure there are certain guitars, they go, for this particular sound, I need that guitar, and they're comfortable playing that for certain parts. I find it fairly similar for my VSTs. I know what will work in it for a given situation. And that's just experience. That's just a case of using them.
Yeah, I think that what you said right there is something that separates amateurs from professionals, is that you know how to use the handful of VSTs that you can rely on. You know exactly which one to grab for which scenario, which patches are going to work. And you don't spend hours of time hitting the right arrow key, flipping through sounds and saying, not quite, not quite, not quite, not quite, there it is. I've burned a lot of time doing that. I don't particularly consider myself a professional with synthesizers, but your thought of, I have a few that I know inside and out, and those are the ones that I go to or start with at the very least. And maybe you'll go on an exploration journey somewhere to find a sound that you haven't quite used before, but your starting point, and you know how to lay that foundation quickly so that you can capture the idea and keep moving forward.
100%. I mean, and that's the key thing for me now. Is I've heard it called flow state, and I think it is right. It's a good description. That's why I get everything ready. It's a bit like a painter who gets his palette ready with all the paints on it, so that once he goes, right, I'm off, and boom, you're away. I want to create as quickly as I possibly can, and I can't do that if I don't know what I'm going to use. So I have things, fairly well organized. Same with my sound samples. If I want to bring in an audio sample, I've got them very well organized. But to be honest, the biggest thing that helps me with the organization and speed of using those VSTs is the Stream Deck, which I don't know if you're familiar with it, but if any of the listeners are not familiar with it, well, I think it's the best piece of hardware I've bought. I could almost say ever, because it's the one thing that's improved my workflow efficiency, and that makes me enjoy using the VSTs even more, because a lot of the VSTs and things I'm doing a lot of things with them through my Stream Deck, mainly just in shortcuts and.
Can you give an example of a VST that works well with the Stream Deck and how you utilize that technology?
It's mainly because I can set up my Stream Deck. I mean, I could do it on my keyboard with key switches, but I'm basically using the Stream Deck as key switches with my VSTs and for triggering, because you can use, even though you can actually set them up to trigger MIDI controller, continuous controller numbers. So you can set them up, and they will do specific tasks. So as long as your VST, you can use controller numbers, then you can control it from your Stream Deck. I mean, I have other MIDI controllers as well that I use, but I just find the Stream Deck is so close to me, and I just find it so handy.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And with the DAW, with the DAW, it just takes the use of the DAW to a different level using the Stream Deck. You
mentioned a few minutes ago audio sampling. Mm-hmm. Do you create your own audio samples? I see you have a piano behind you. Do you ever record things organically and then resample it? Yeah, I've. I don't even see it there, but obviously the listeners can't see it. But as part of my master's degree, I produced like a sound lab, which was basically a hacked off acoustic guitar, which I drilled all sorts of things to it and put contact mics inside it. Oh, wow. To make lots and lots of sound, to make a huge sound library of just weird sounds that I often use as percussion foley. And so I do a lot of audio sampling. Using either contact mics, field recorders. The best one we've all got is our mobile phone. Yeah. And any sound that just sort of strikes me as either it sounds great or it might have pitch, I just record it, and then I'll do a sound design session where I'll just bring it into either the DAW sampler if it's something really simple, but if it needs something anything more complex, then I will use Native Instruments Contact. And as a challenge, it was particularly during my degree, I made 2 tracks just using instruments that I'd made myself from sampling, and it was actually amazing the feedback I got from people that saying that was really good. And you think, actually, I've made that from just items that are in the house, or little, like my granddaughter's got a crocodile xylophone, and there's different ways of triggering it. You can either hit it or you can use a little key press, and in there were a multitude of sounds. And then from there, my wife sold melodica, and then the piano at the behind you, which appears a lot in my music. It just opens another world, and the great thing is for a lot of these sounds, nobody else has got those sounds. They are totally original. They may have something similar, and I think that's what helps with making your music sound, hopefully a little bit different.
We've touched on that before. No one's got that piano, that specific piano. Now, whether that's you've mic'd that up and recorded it, you playing the audio, or you've sampled it and used that later, no one has that piano. Yeah. And same with the various percussion things that I've done, and I tried to use organic things like I think you can probably just see on the top of the piano there are some little tubes. Those tubes are old chocolate things or coffee tins with rice in them or whatever, and so I do a lot of shakers. Even for EDM, I'll often do my own shaker tracks, because that little bit of organic variation just adds that little something. That the human ear is amazing at detecting that it is something not mechanical, like a programmed hi-hat or shaker. Yeah. Have you ever thought about compiling sounds into a releasable product? I know that like the Native Instruments platform does make that. I can't say for sure, but it seems like it makes it fairly accessible to just about anybody to release your own sample pack. Yes. I release them, but I release them for free purely because there was a community during lockdown that was set up by one of the co-founders of Spitfire Audio. Spitfire Audio make a lot of the orchestral virtual instruments that I use, and it was called Piano Book, and you may have heard of it. It's a repository of, initially it was primarily contact instruments, and really for the contact, full contact, which is quite expensive, whereas a lot of instruments are produced with a contact player, which is free. But somebody who was involved with Piano Book at the time produced a completely new format called Decent Sampler, and David Hillowitz is his name, who has an amazing blog on YouTube, which is absolutely fantastic if ever you want to listen to it. And he produces lots of free ones. And because there were so many people contributing free instruments, that I use so much of these Piano Book instruments
that I you've got to give back as well. So that piano behind is in the piano book depository, as is a drone that I had, because as I was flying the drone, I thought, hang on a minute. When it was hovering, I thought, this has got a pitch. It turned out to be C3, middle C, I think it was. And so I sampled it. And it's amazing all the things that you can sample. And so I do make these instruments, but I put them in the depository called Piano Book.
Well, we'll put a link to that. That is fascinating. I've never heard of this before.
Piano Book is amazing.
That's cool.
It's about to get a complete relift because I won't bore you with the politics, but that co-founder left Spitfire Audio and has set up his own sample company, and they're resurrecting Piano Book. It's going to be called Audio Inc. or Audio Incorporated. It's going to take me a bit of getting used to, but it's to carry on the tradition of making available to musicians free virtual instruments to be able to get going in their career. And some of the standard of some of the instruments in Piano Book are unbelievable.
Wow.
Oh, definitely.
I need to dive into this. Yeah. And so it's a community where someone else could join and contribute their own sound.
Absolutely.
Too, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Again, the spoils of modern technology and music making, man. Like, you couldn't dream of this 20 years ago.
We are living in an amazing era for making music at home. I mean, we all know that, but it's just, you have to remind yourself sometimes how fortunate we are in this. It is a golden era of recording music at home. No two ways about it. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to come on to the stock questions, Bob. The stock questions that everybody gets asked. Or we only started like 2 episodes ago, but that's the new format.
The rapid fire.
Rapid fire. So, not the EQ or compression built into your DAW. What's one plugin you can't live without?
The one plugin?
Yeah, one plugin you can't live without.
And not standard EQ or
no standard EQ or compression.
It would have to be Native Instruments Contact. Because of what I've just been, discussing, that you can put in your own instruments, but there's a massive library of instruments. Every instrument you can almost conceive is available in Contact, and then you can do your own. So yeah, you could make a whole album easily. And if you can't, you shouldn't be making music.
Yeah, probably should start again and do something else. So, excuse me. Oh, so the other question, and I think this is actually more complicated for you, seeing as that I know you slightly, is what DAW do you use? What is your digital audio workstation?
Well, the prime one is Cubase Pro. But because I've started to do ambient music, I've been following an artist called State Azure, and he was putting out a lot of live streams, and I noticed how he was doing his ambient, which I just loved his workflow, and that was in Bitwig, which is very similar to Ableton, and it has a thing called a clip launcher in Bitwig. I think it is called a clip launcher in Bitwig. Forgive me if I can't remember what it is called. But what that allows you to do is it allows you to set up different size loops. So it could be an 8-bar loop, 16-bar, 32, 2, 1, or whatever. You can do that in Cubase, but it's so clunky, and I couldn't get on with it. So Cubase for normal work, Bitwig for ambient, and then for mastering, I just found the workflow in Studio One just worked for me. I did try Wavelab, but I didn't get on with it, and so I use 3 DAWs.
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. I think that having, again, that ability for you to say, this works for this works for that, this works for other things, and being able to separate those instead of trying to just cram everything into one box and say, this is where I'm going to do all my work. And a lot of times you end up cutting yourself short, or just, you can't do something in a particular DAW. So you say, well, I'm going to abandon that idea and try something else. But that idea could work perfectly in this DAW over here, right? And you can achieve that. I
totally agree.
I think that's fantastic.
That was the conclusion I came to, and it makes things faster as well. Because you know the workflow and you know it works. And the great thing, and the other great thing is that, and I haven't tried this yet, and I will be doing next year, is that because we've now got this open door project file format, there are certain limitations in Bitwig, but I'm going to be able to export that ambient session into the DAW. I really know my way around and put it into Cubase.
So Cubase is offering compatibility with that.
It's already got it in Cubase 14, which I'm just about to purchase because I've trialed it and it's amazing. It's a really good version. So
I think that's a really
Studio
interesting
One was the first
development
to get on with it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Correct. They offered it 2 years ago, I think, 3 years ago, if I remember. I think that's a fantastic sort of turn of events in the audio industry, having this sort of open format compatibility. Because
I think it's the equivalent of Midi.
Yeah.
Look what Midi did. I mean, when you got some manufacturers sat around a table in 1983 and that format is still going strong, it shows you what can be done if people who really want to do something. So I think it's great that these manufacturers not manufacturers, these software producers are producing this open format. I think it's fantastic.
Sure. Yeah.
It's good times. Good times to be able to sort of mix and match your DAW and take the sessions across, and who knows where that will end.
I mean, sometimes I shake my head when I'm looking at what I'm running. I might be running sort of on some of these orchestration tracks. I'm running 85 to 100 tracks. It's still all in MIDI, the most of it, not all audio. And I'm looking at my CPU thing, and it's still got headroom to go. And I'm thinking, this is bonkers. This is absolutely, and probably about 50 plugins or something. And automation, because that's generally what I find eats up the CPU. And it's just, I shake my head a lot.
Remember when I said Bob's tracks were complex and had huge depth, and he said they're not complex and they've got 87 to 100 audio MIDI instrumentation tracks. I think that I'm going to class that as complex, Bob.
That's pretty complex.
I have to say, I more recently, I'm down to some of the ones that you just mastered recently are down to about 35.
Yeah.
But that's because of layering. I mean, I do a lot of layering. So, and layering is very important. You look at an orchestra. There's your perfect example of layering on how to achieve certain sounds. So, it's a bit like somebody used to say to me, how many flying hours have you got? And you could say, well, I've got 7,000. I'll say, oh, somebody else has got 15,000 hours. Well, it's what you do with those hours, and it's the same with the tracks. I don't think a track count is necessarily an indicator of how complex a piece of music is what you've done with those. If they're used the right way, those 80 to 100 tracks can produce something amazing. And I think you'll find the likes of Hans Zimmer and people like that, you don't really want to know what their track count is.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, as you're building that track count and you're collecting those instruments and sounds to make up your song, how often are you committing those VSTs to audio and discarding the VST and moving forward? Or do you keep everything in VST?
I used to have to commit to audio because the CPU wouldn't cope before. But I am getting a lot more disciplined in committing to audio. Excuse me, mainly because you can do a bit more with audio that you can't do with MIDI. So if I'm finding that's the case, then I will. But what I used to do is I used to put everything into audio. Then I would import it back into Cubase as a mixing session. And I always used to find that I used to lose the vibe that by doing that pause and that break and that change. And so what I tend to do now is that most of the stuff you received, Ben, for the last album was still in MIDI. And then as soon as I sent it to you, that was my commitment. Then I archived everything. So everything is gone to audio eventually. And I think it all depends. Here, I've just used it for the first time today. It all depends. It all depends. Sometimes I will commit. I will commit.
All right.
It really does, because you've got that extra bit of control if you've still got it in MIDI. That because somebody might point something out to you, and you go, do you know what? I think that's a really good idea. And you change it. But I always save it as a new version, just in case that I think, because I think the other thing is, the one thing I've found with getting constructive advice from some colleagues is that some of it's really good, and some of it, if you're not careful, you'll follow it and think, hang on a minute, that my gut instinct at the beginning was right. So, and you can only develop that with experience. So I think, yes, listen to what people have to say, but if your gut is telling you to go down a certain route, I would trust your gut, because, you know, you've lived with that for a long, long time. But if 10 people are telling you that something sounds dodgy, I would certainly listen to them.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think your gut instinct should always be your guide, because it's the bit that started that track, and it's the bit that led you down that road. Yeah, other people can give you some good advice on, you know, some finer points, but yeah, your gut instinct's always the bit that's right at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that following your gut is very important.
Yeah, and everything in life, I would say. But
yeah, I agree. And so many times I haven't followed it and regretted it.
Yeah, I think you can never be wrong if you've made a decision based on what you feel at the time is the right thing. You can only say it didn't work out as you hoped.
There's so many times where I'm watching a mixing video or a video about a song that was produced, and a question comes up: How did you come up with this sound? And it's like, well, it was just a sort of a gut choice, and I moved on, right? And you don't think about, if you give yourself a chance to second guess a decision and not follow your gut, you end up getting stuck in that area. And just make that decision, let your gut decide whether it's good or not in the moment, and move forward. And it seems like just about 9.9 times out of 10, that is the right decision that you made.
Yeah. Well, look, that's an hour, people.
Oh my goodness.
I can't believe it. We're actually going to hit the hour mark for the first time ever in this podcast history.
Yeah, we'll see. We still got a couple of, minutes. we can fluff it up a little bit.
Then here's the slippery slope then.
Yeah, this is where we now start on another topic, and 45 minutes later we're still talking.
So Bob, tell us about your favorite gin, if you would. Okay.
Well, that is a good question. We should definitely find Hendrix. Bob's favorite gin. Hendrix is a good gin.
I still think we'll have an audio happy hour session, and just invite guests, and we'll just talk about alcohol instead of music.
Talk about booze for half an hour.
A different type of mixing. Your favorite mixed drinks.
Yeah.
But the answer is Hendrix.
Yeah, that's your favorite gin.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right.
My second favorite gin would be, there's a distillery here in St. Pete. It's called Old St. Pete, and they have an orange infused gin.
Nice.
And that is fantastic.
Be great in a Negroni.
Fantastic. Yes.
And now we've gone over an hour. There we go.
There we go. Straight through. Well done, everybody. Well, look, I think we can wrap it up there. I think I've loved this conversation. I mean,
this is great, Bob.
Loved hearing about all your process, how you work, because we'll put links to, obviously, to your YouTube channel and everywhere that people can find your music. Because I think if you've listened to this podcast and you've never heard any of Bob's music, follow the links, go and check it out. I think it will blow your mind, because every time something lands on my mastering desk from Bob, I'm like, well, this is only going to be a good session. So definitely go and check it out.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're absolutely welcome. So, yeah, go and check it out. We'll put links to... I've made notes this week, guys. Actually made notes of what we should put links to. I know. It's only the start of season 2. We're only 13 episodes in.
It's all right.
We'll put links to your YouTube, Piano Book, Native Instruments Contact, Cubase, Bitwig. They'll all be in the show notes down below. I don't know why I'm pointing down below. No one's watching. They'll be in the show notes down below.
Smash that like and subscribe right down here.
Exactly. And look, gents, it's been a pleasure. I've loved it.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you. Thoroughly enjoyed it as well. Thank you.
Been quite good speaking to the other two of you as well. And and we'll do it all again next month with another guest.
Do it again next month.
All right.
Yep. Thank you for listening to Sound Discussion. Your hosts are Ben Holmes, Neil Merchant, and me, Nate Kelms. Our theme song is composed and recorded by Jojo Timmerman. You can find us on the internet at sounddiscussionpodcast.com, or you can drop us a line at sounddiscussionpodcast@gmail.com. Additional show notes for this episode can be found on our website or in the description area of your podcast player. A big thank you to our guest for taking the time to chat with us today, and to you, the listener, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be part of our discussion. We look forward to having you join us again next month on another episode of Sound Discussion.
And then, much to my wife's consternation, I discovered golf. And that was the end of music.